This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In today's episode, I speak with Michael Gebben, and we talk about the power of asking, the work he's done with Tim Ferris, Tony Robbins, and Richard Branson, and why he's a believer in massive imperfect action. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor. I'm delighted today to be joined by Michael Gebben. Michael Gebben spent 7 years building a video company that was the envy of everyone in his field, GebbsTV, until one day he woke up to the realization that he'd built a cage of his own making, and giving up so much of his life in the name of something that didn't really mean a whole lot. So he hit reset, and over the last 3 years rebuilt his life and career around what matters, and even launched a new inspirational YouTube channel. Michael's current company, Jumpstarters, helps creative entrepreneurs to get over the same hurdles that he was able to conquer, allowing him to work with individuals such as Tim Ferris, Tony Robbins, and Richard Branson. Michael is a big believer in massive imperfect action, rather than getting stuck in the minutiae and never moving forward. And it's my great pleasure to have Michael join us today. So welcome, Michael.
James, thanks for having me today, buddy. I'm super excited to bring fire and energy for your audience.
So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Yeah, it's been crazy. We're actually moving into a new house, and been a lot of travel kind of lately with some different projects. But just doing my best to kind of use the tools that I've learned that used to knock me down and have me just totally out of commission and super stressed and for what felt like forever. And have all this kind of busyness that's kind of hit me at one time right now from different angles, and keep my head held high and keep a positive attitude and outlook on everything. So
now, we have a mutual friend in Jonathan Fields, and I was watching an interview that you did with Jonathan the other day, and you were talking about a really beautiful thing. This is kind of before we kind of get into all the business side and all the work and all the cool things you've
Sure.
been doing, but you did something really beautiful. You live in, I think you're in St. Louis.
I'm near St. Louis, Missouri. Yeah, I live in Illinois. About 26,000 people where I live.
And you do this really cool thing. Obviously, this is probably getting a little bit more difficult now when you're traveling and you're doing all this work. I know you've just been in LA, but tell people, what do you do every morning when you're at home?
Sure. Yeah. That's what what I'm about to talk about is actually how I got on Jonathan's podcast. So I had reached it. Well, interestingly enough, I reached out to Jonathan the same way, which we can get right into on certain levels, Tim Ferris and Tony Robbins and a number of other people, which is really via email, actually. And I reached out, and I just kind of stayed persistent, stayed top of mind with Jonathan. And one day I posted a photo with my grandpa. And I said, it's great to have built a life where, every morning I get to walk with my grandpa when I'm basically, as you alluded to, when I'm in town. And, it's really fascinating because, for all the creatives out there, one day I asked my grandpa what was his biggest regret of something he did and his biggest regret of something he did not do. And instantly he had the did not do, but he couldn't come up with the thing he did that he's like, oh, I really wished I hadn't done that. And the thing that he did not do is he was a writer, and he had these novels, and he actually had one agent who went to one publisher, and that was it, just one. And basically they told him if he would have written these 50 years ago, they'd have been bestsellers. And that's what, he has kept with him, what I believe is a good part of 30, 40 years now, that he's lived with the fact that, and now of course it's far easier on a lot of levels to get quote unquote published, but on other levels, it's still just as difficult to get noticed. But it's interesting. He lacks almost all enthusiasm and passion for it at all now, though, interestingly enough. But I just think that the old cliche that when you get older, you're going to regret the things you didn't do. I've really seen play out in people that I've gotten to be around. There's a lot of other older people at the mall as well. I'm probably the youngest by like 20 or 30 years. But it's really fascinating because I see that we can sometimes regret things, I feel like, in the moment, but in the big picture of life, I believe that once 20, 30 years, even 5 years, even just a couple days at times, these things that we seemingly regret of something we did, and we're like, I wish I wouldn't have done that. They just become so inconsequential, and they're just a little bump in the road. But it's those things that you didn't go after. You didn't take the plunge. You didn't, I say the worst thing is going to happen is you get a no, and you get a no, and you don't ask, you don't try. At least when you try, there is an opportunity for something good to happen. And really, the Tim Ferris thing in 2010 was the biggest shift for me, seeing that, I guess being a little naive at the time, honestly, and now I can apply this more consciously and have more awareness to it and more being more intentional, and others I've seen do this as well. But, I didn't really, I just saw a comment from Tim on the blog that some kid wanted a refund for his launch party. And he said, email Charlie at the 4-Hour Body. And I thought, what do I have to lose? I'll just email Charlie and offer up a free video. And really, that was the biggest thing that helped me open up doors, is taking my skill set. And why I love creatives and people who have really a service they can provide to someone is that you have a gift and talent that you can essentially gift people without any expectation of getting anything in return. And people say, well, I do all sorts of things for free at times, but it doesn't lead to anything or whatever. Well, I believe when people come to you wanting free things, that's one thing. When they're like, oh, well, man, I'm going to hook you up. I got all these people, But what I've done is I go to people. And if you really love that thing that you're doing, if you truly didn't need any money, would you not want to do that thing anyways? And that's what I found is, for me, yeah, of course we need money, and of course we need to get paid, and of course we want to get paid and all these things. But my career went where it went and got to where it got to because I did so many things for people that I just wanted to give. On a lot of those bigger scenarios, I wanted to give back to them. I felt that their books or their audios or their videos or whatever had already given to me. So I just had this skill set that I could give back. But kind of long, little drawn out intro there, but I'll take a breath.
No, I love, you're talking about your grandfather and going, and I know a lot of the stuff that you're doing, you're traveling, especially to larger events, and it's, especially kind of big motivational events, and they can be very up. And what I love about that is the fact you're able to kind of ground it in the everyday as well. So you are working with these kind of thought leaders in this space as well, but you're also able to ground it and have those kind of conversations, with a family member.
But James, I want to say too, something that's been huge, for me recently, I did this thing, and you may have even noticed if you looked at anything, but it looks like it says hashtag Mia Smile Challenge on my Instagram and Facebook. Well, it doesn't let you put a dot in a hashtag, or else it just ends it. So it would be hashtag M dot and it would end. So I had to just do, have it where it looks kind of odd. It looks like a girl's name, Mia, but it's really standing for the MIA, the Massive Imperfect Action. And I just thought one day I had all these people always commenting on my smile, my infectious energy. And I thought, well, people who meet me, once they see it again, it reminds them of that interaction in person. And even other people who would see it online would leave me private messages and things. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start just this little challenge thing. I never made a big stink out of it of trying to really get anybody to use the hashtag per se. A handful of people have. But for me, it was just being consistent with this, finding something each day that's not just, because when I started, I'm like, am I just going to put a selfie up of myself every day? Like, well, that's going to get old real quick. So I found the everyday, quote unquote, interaction or moment. Moments matter to me. And I took pictures with random people, whether it's the waitress at IHOP or it's, Les Brown at this event I was at this past weekend, but everybody in between. And what I found is it's people like my wife's, grandma who, essentially is 90 years old and does 80 push-ups a day. And, people like herself, or even, my grandpa for certain reasons, and, other people, but it's like, you find that the everyday common person who's busting their butt to make ends meet or even go for their dreams, there's times where these unknown people are more inspiring and even more, they're more real than some of the people that I've been able to interact with at the top. Now, not all. I'm not going to point any fingers, but I have found that I've found more inspiration at times with the people that no one knows who they are versus even some of the people at the celebrity level, because who's going to be there for me if I pick up the phone? Well, 99% of the celebrity people that I know are not going to be. I have some friends that have become really good friends, and they are phenomenal human beings. But most, it's going to be my good buddy that nobody knows who they are, and that's the person I can call.
Going out, reaching out to people with that level of wanting to serve, level of service as well. How can I help? And it reminds me a little bit of, I know Ryan Holiday talks about this, the writer who we've had on the show before
Ryan,
as well, Ryan. And he talks about, and I'm trying to remember the name of the author that he basically did this very similar thing with, and just kind of reached out to him and said, I want to help. How can I help? And he had Ryan's got. I
think he's done stuff for Tucker Max.
Yeah, maybe Tucker Max. Yeah, and Ryan's got he's got a kind of certain kind of skill set as well, and it's just that we had another guest on recently, Amanda Palmer, who talked about had a book out and a TED talk about it. It's called The Art of Asking. Where he said, I'm continually, you must feel the same, continually kind of surprised sometimes when you do kind of go out there and put yourself out there and ask, can I help?
But and I don't know if she said this, a specific ask, a specific help. Yeah. Not what I found is some of the people, when I get to know these guys though, they're like, people will ask me all the time, or not ask, but they'll say, let me know what you need. I'll do anything. And now you make them work to figure out, well, what could you do? And then they're so busy, they're not going to do it. But, for me, it hasn't been, let me know whatever you think I could do to help you. It's been, here's the type of video that I create, and you have an event. How about I make you one of those kind of videos for your event? And it's not this just open-ended, arbitrary, random, I'll do whatever you need. This is the gift and talent that I have that I can provide to you. Thank you for what you've done and what you do for the world. And sometimes, honestly, it's a VIP backstage pass for me. We were we didn't pay a dime and got paid at the thing I was at with Brendan Bouchard this past weekend. And I'm backstage with Peter Diamandis, the billionaire, just doing all sorts. He was backstage talking to Brendan. He goes, just started my 19th company, and it's just but so my skill set has allowed me to be VIP and backstage at things that, quite frankly, there's no amount of money sometimes that can even buy that. There's no option at these events to buy a backstage pass and hang out in the green room. There's a VIP ticket, and it gets you pretty much, 2 seconds with, one of these people if they pop out from backstage. So I mentioned, you started the GebbsTV, a video company, and you did some really, really cool stuff on there. But it sounds like there came a point in that, and doing all that work, where you kind of had to you decided to make a bit of a change, a bit of a switch. What was the thinking? Well, first of all, maybe just kind of talk. You've spoken. I know you've done things like Tony Robbins, for example, in relation to with the GebbsTV side of things. But what was that point of that realization? Well, for me, it was change. I think that a lot of what I see with a lot of creatives is that we're not confident enough in exactly what our kind of specialty or sweet spot is, or belief in our self-worth. And having that self-awareness to know, here's what I'm great at and here's what I'm not great at. And if things come into my business that essentially someone asks me to do something that I know this is not something, especially the people out there who are more the solopreneur, right? If you've got more of a agency model, or you have multiple people in your company where you can cover a whole multitude of different, services, then that's one thing. But a lot of the people out there who, really aren't great at, Photoshop, some motion graphics software, and then be a great writer, and then a designer, and then a photographer, and then a DJ, and a videographer, and then a public speaker. And, they're trying to do 20 things at once. And I think that that's wonderful. And believe me, I am the master of the shiny object syndrome and jack of all trades and, master of nothing. That was what GebbsTV stood for. It started as total video. So that really meant exactly what it stands for. It should have just said total everything, because basically anything that I could point a camera at, or anything that anybody would bring me creatively, I would say yes to. And what happened is this was 2004 in high school, I started doing funeral slideshows. But by 2010, I was doing well in the grand scheme of things of business from a financial. I mean, we had reached over six figures. I've got people, just getting engaged in their wedding and wanting to book me. I mean, I wasn't dead last anymore. So I was doing tons of weddings. I was doing, Pentecostal church services, dance recitals, graduations, film transfers. I mean, we're doing it all. And what's funny is somebody said once, they're like, it must be nice to just work on weekends. Just one day a week. They thought I just, did a wedding on a Saturday. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if you only knew, I've ruined relationships and all sorts of things because I was so unaware of how to really do all this. So I just went all in on business. But what happened was I was so overwhelmed. I mean, I didn't want to go out to the movies because I thought I'd see a couple that was going to chew me out because their DVD was 9 months behind. But I did this thing called a same-day edit, and I would shoot that day, and I would show the video that night. And that video I loved doing. And ultimately, when I did it, the reactions from people were incredible. I mean, people went crazy. But when I didn't do that, you give them a DVD, even if it was, a couple weeks later, at times I would barely even get a response ever from them. I had one couple, I think 4 years later, they had kids and wanted me to do some kind of slideshow. And they're like, oh, I don't know if you remember us, da 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 da. And I'm like, well, I do remember you, but I delivered their stuff. Literally from the day they got it in the mail, or really from the wedding, because I already had their address and I just sent it in the mail. From the time their wedding ended till 4 years later, I never heard a peep out of them. Whether they got the DVDs, whether they enjoyed the DVDs. This was before I did some follow up and things as well. But so when I did a same-day edit, I got to see the reactions, and I loved it. But people, hated wedding videos in the beginning because people thought they sucked. I mean, there's a lot of great people now, but when I started, there weren't that many great videographers out there doing wedding videos. And so it was hard, one, to convince them at times to do the video in general. Two, to do a same-day edit was even harder. I mean, they're like, well, wouldn't it be better if you had more than 2 hours, which is a whole other thread of, equating value to the time and hours and hard work spent doing something, which I now know is not true. It's not about it taking 50 hours and being more valuable. If I can get you a result in 5, you pay more money to do that than wait years or months or tons of time. And so for me, I ended up kind of coming to this point where I now call it, which I think a lot of creatives I've seen, this really resonates, because what we're doing is we're so influenced by either podcasts we listen to, writers, photographers, videographers, other creatives, whoever it is that we look up to. And they have their own business models. They have their own paths they've taken. They have all this stuff. But then the ones who might be teaching or selling something, they're typically selling a framework and a formula that's exactly to a T what worked for them. And so what I found is I had all these people influencing me, and I was doing all these things. And really, when I look back, 20% of my time made 80% of my money, which was my weddings and really my same-day edit. And then 80% of my time was just spent on random things that didn't hardly make me any money, but consumed the majority of my time on a daily and weekly and monthly basis. And so finally I said, screw it. I'm so fed up with kind of all this. I don't even want to look at half the work we do when I'm done with it, that I am going to do what I now have coined the my way decision. So this sounds very selfish up front, but I'll explain it. I was going to shoot, edit, dress, speak, everything my way. Like I would pick out the music. I mean, there was no more being this all-you-could-eat buffet, whatever you guys want. I'm here to do it for you. Now, granted, the way I explained, I'm a very friendly, nice, kind. That's one of the things that's been a advantage for me. But the way I explain this now, it comes across a little bit more direct. But basically, what I found is I was disservicing my clients when I just took on something where it was one of those jobs where, they tell you something, oh, you're really creative, or you could do this, or you could come up with this. And in our minds, we go, here we go again. Another one of these jobs. I'm going to hate this. I'm going to, whatever. But out of your mouth goes, yeah, I can do that. And then you procrastinate, you complain, you don't do as good of a job, whatever. And so I found I was disservicing people versus when I went and did this my way thing and I was on the verge of just giving up, I now was pouring my heart and soul into every single interaction, every project. And that within 12 months was when Tim Ferris, Tony Robbins, Richard Branson, all these crazy things started to happen because I got so confident and clear about what I was great at, what I wanted, what I didn't want, and in getting my life back, that people felt that. And as a byproduct, I got more time back. I got happier. I got higher paying jobs. I got more awesome clients. Like, it was incredible that this thing that looked very selfish actually served me and them at a level that I hadn't served anybody in the past before, because ultimately I was just doing anything anybody wanted and not being like, you don't go into a sushi restaurant, ask them to make you a supreme pizza. They're not going to make you pizza at all. And so that's kind of what ultimately happened.
But essentially, I mean, that path that you took there, I mean, that's a friend of mine, Derek Sivers, talks about this sometimes,
Sure.
where he, he said often at the start of your career, you're doing lots of things, and
Yes.
and you're saying yes to everything, and that's part of the deal, because one thing is you wanted to find what you enjoy doing, the kind of work you enjoy doing. But there quickly becomes a point where you have to kind of invert that and actually say no. In fact, I've got a big...
Well, the hell yes or the hell no. I mean, I love Derek. His book
yes,
is, I mean, you'll ask me it at the end, but he would be one of the books that I would highly
Derek's
recommend.
great. And I actually have a sticker up here in front of my desk which just says no, just says the word no. So, but, you kind of went through that journey of kind of being open to every piece of work, and then kind of gradually thinking, okay, and starting to refine down to the essence of where you really kind of shone, as a creative as well. But where did the transition came? Because the work you're doing with Jumpstarters now, from outside people could look at, well, this feels like a completely different thing.
Sure.
But at the same time, it also feels like there is a bit of there's a thread that's kind of going through. And so you can talk about the kind of what you're doing with Jumpstarters now.
Well, there is, and what's fascinating is as I had these breakthroughs, so I had the pain and the struggle, which I don't basically claim to completely, I don't think anybody can ultimately I know with 100% confidence, no one can completely remove the pain and the struggle, because there will always be pain and struggle. And I think we won't appreciate the great things if we don't have the struggle. And in fact, I think that ultimately what's happening is the amount of people I've met who, are like, I could only get your word in front of you. I could only get no so many times. I could only get, we've already found somebody else so many times. I could only get, it's too expensive so many times. So I gave up. And I think that the world, the universe, whatever you believe in, God, has set things up in life to where there's going to be a struggle. And without it, we won't appreciate the other side, the achievement, the result. You won't appreciate the sun if there were no darkness, et cetera, et cetera. And so, for me, what I found is I mean, the girl I'm married to now, I mean, we dated for about 3 years, and we broke up at late 2009 and got back together in 2012. And I mean, just tons of relationships just got obliterated because I was 100% focused on my business. From the time I started around 2006 with no college, just went all in on it. Until then, when I made this shift in late 2010, 2011, I started to get more clear. I started to get more time back. And what's interesting is I didn't see what had exactly happened, but I felt it, and I felt so much better. And I was kind of known in my industry, and I was speaking at events, and people were seeing my work, and they were reaching out to spend these days with me. Well, ultimately, they reached out to learn how to mentor with me or train with me, and I was just like, I don't know. I mean, we can spend a day together. And they would come, and we'd spend a day together, and then we'd keep in touch. And a handful of those people, we became really good friends. And so what happened was I had a number of them that 3, 4, 5 years later are going, they've built 6-figure companies. And then I'd say, man, I'm so proud of you. It's so exciting to see this all happening for you. And then they would say, well, I couldn't have done it without you. Now, this was an example of what happened here with my thought process that I'll guide you through. Was in my mind, I had really low self-worth with my ability to help people kind of shift their mindset or transform their life to get the things that they really want or desire. Because I would say, well, wow, I didn't really do anything. Like in my mind, I did nothing. I mean, we spent a day together. They went and spent the next 3 years busting their butt to make things happen. But in their mind, that day completely changed the trajectory of their life. And without that day, they don't believe that they would have been where they currently are. But I was sitting here going, well, I only spent a day. I didn't spend that much time. Therefore, it's not that valuable. It's not worth that much. But I kept hearing it a lot. And then I just had this bug for all this. So one day I was actually telling my grandpa, I said, these people are saying this to me, but I feel like I'm kind of like a jump starter. And I said, you leave the lights on in your car overnight. The car can be great. Everything, inside, outside, everything around in the car is fine. But if it drains the battery in the morning, the car is not going to start. And so another car pulls up, opens its hood, open the hood on the car that's not working, take the jumper cables, and you jump the car. And then ultimately, you take the cables out, you close the hoods, and the cars go in their separate directions, and you're good to go. And what I found was that was kind of what I was doing for people. I was spending this day with people, and then their lives were changing. They were getting this boost. They were getting this energy. They were getting this mental shift that was allowing them to accomplish things that they had never accomplished in years, some of the people that we've dealt with. But what's interesting is I had this shift, didn't call it Jumpstarters till 2014. I had the shift maybe around 2012. I really started to get this bug for wanting to help others, because what other people have now seen that I wasn't seeing, I was doing that the whole time. When I was at weddings, the people were telling me I had infectious energy. I had more fun talking to the people than I did filming. I had more fun when somebody, a 75-year-old lady brought in her, 1940s film or whatever and wanted it transferred to DVD. I'd spend 2 hours talking to that lady. So what I didn't recognize is that I'm a people person and I love people. And my competitive advantage in my company wasn't my ability to be epic at my creative skills in regards to creating video. Although I at the time I got going, I feel like I had a little bit of a monopoly. I had a little bit of an edge over what was being done before. Now it's highly saturated in a lot of levels, but it was still and still is today. My competitive advantage is my personality, is my energy, my ability to care more for people than the average person does. Because the average person, I wouldn't say average, but the more norm, especially in creative fields, is the people care more about their art than they care about the client or they care about the people. And I've seen that just time and time again. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for having a business, you got to be at the top for people to overlook the inefficiencies or lack of maybe personality or people skills because your work is so unbelievable. And what I'm even finding is that's shifting. There's so many options now that people don't even have to put up with that anymore. They don't have to put up with a jerk because their work is so good. In fact, a lot of the jobs we're getting in my video company where my team's going out, we're finding that the people I've made connections and relationships with, they're going, I can't tolerate this guy anymore. He's amazing work, but he takes forever to respond, forever to turn around the work. He even tells me he hates the business side of things. I've referred him to other people. He didn't even deliver anything ever to them. And I'm getting tons of jobs like that where they're either getting incredible work and horrible service, or they're getting pretty good, like really good service, but not that great work. And so my goal is to merge those two worlds. And for me, what I recognize is kind of putting the right people in place who love, like they're in their sweet spots. And that's what I really want for others. But what I found even in myself, so the thread is also when I went to help others and build that side of things, I fell into the same trap that I fell into initially with my video production, which was I did everything. So that's one thing that started. And then two, I really was heavily influenced by other people. So I couldn't find my way, which I think you won't find immediately anyways. You do have to try things and do things, but you have to find very quickly that you have to be kind of like a sculptor, and you have to be sculpting what is that thing for you and ignore the crowd, because the people that people look up to, people like even Casey Neistat out there right now who's doing things, it's like he molded his own path in his own way. And now people are doing videos on him on how to vlog like him, how to edit like him. But if he was like everyone else, and if he was following everybody else's blueprint, they're not the people that are typically in rare form or in high demand or charging the high rates because they're in people's eyes on certain levels, they're a knockoff. And what I found is I was a knockoff in the coaching training space because I was just trying to do what everyone else was doing and not doing things my way, which was really that personalized, customized, service for people where I really, dove deep rather than very surface level and just have somebody go through like a course, which is what everybody was telling me to do.
And just, as you're speaking just now, I'm intrigued. Do you know your personality type? Well,
depending on what I love one of the things we do within Jumpstarters, we use the disc and motivators.
Yeah.
And so, I'm a core I on the disc. And what's interesting is for people that a lot of people have you taken disc before?
No, it's just as you're speaking and in terms of what you're saying there about being able to find something and find the possibilities in other people. That's often displayed by people who are kind of ENFPs, ENTPs.
I've never gotten super into the Myers-Briggs actually, personally.
So because what you're speaking about just now is the kind of what ifs. You're very future pace, future forward.
100%. On Colby test, I'm a quick start. On the disc, I'm pretty much a core I. And so for me, so we use those types of tools, and we use them, I believe, in a slightly different way. Because what I found is a lot of those companies are actually just that. They're well, let me explain that. Of course, they're a company, but they're a company in the sense of they're more built, in my humble opinion, to make as much money as possible by selling assessments in bulk, or even just the free ones that are out there. There's one like 16personalities.com that's ultimately free that gives you a lot of information on the Myers-Briggs. But what I found is at least, especially from my style of personality, is that these PDFs and these little documents and printouts and things like that, they don't do anything for me. I read them, I find them fascinating. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That kind of sounds like me. Good deal. And then that's it. But like when I broke 6 figures in my video company, I give a lot of credit to the fact I spent a few $1,000s on a guy. I did buy his ebook. It was called like the 6-figure videographer, actually. And the year before I made like $40,000. I made like $106,000. It was in 2008. And I got this guy's stuff in March, but then I did about 4 or 5 one-hour phone calls with him. And it was in those phone calls that I was able to probe on what I found in the PDF actually and get it just slightly tweaked and get the mental shifts for me personally that I was able to run with. And that's really our biggest thing. It's so much is just being shoved on people that is this. I was just with, we mentioned the Burchard thing in the success event. I was talking backstage and they're like, people – they're overloaded with information. Like most people, they know everything they need to know right now to achieve in relationships, achieve in health, achieve in business, achieve in life. They know what they need to do. But why aren't they doing it? Why aren't we doing these things? Like why right now? Full transparency. Why right now have I ultimately gained probably roughly 10 to 15 pounds in the last month and a half? Well, it's very simple. Because for me, I recognize exactly what's going on, and I only have so much willpower and focus and energy that I can exert on any given day. And so for me right now, it's been an area that's been one area I haven't fully ever dialed in. I bounced back. In fact, I walked with my grandpa back to that story for 1 second, is because my dad and brother kept saying I had man boobs back in 2011, I think it was. And I was like almost 190 pounds. For anybody who sees like my picture somewhere, that's around 100 and maybe 65 pounds. And so I was kind of bloated. I had these little, my pectorals were a little bigger than normal. But I started riding my bike and I started walking. I just slightly shifted my diet. But it got really cold outside and I thought, man, I'm going to go to the mall. What am I going to do? So I went to the mall and that's where my grandpa was. But basically, it's been an area that I've had under control for the most part since about 2012. But then in the last couple months, we've been moving. We've had a lot of traveling just lately that had gone on. And I only had so much willpower. And so that was the area, rather than let my business suffer or let my relationship with my wife suffer, that was just the area that I knew I didn't have enough in place that was just automatic for me, which I think is important at times to build habits, like automatic when it comes to diet and food and things. And so for me, it was an area where it was more convenient to just kind of consume whatever than it was to go way out of my way. Like my willpower wasn't enough because I already depleted all my energy on all these other areas to keep them up. That the kind of what I was eating was an area. But now we're getting those other things kind of more dialed back in again. And ultimately now I have more willpower and energy again that we're going to dial back into food. So I know what's happening. I'm aware of it. It's not like I'm completely unaware, but I think that we're unaware of our personality types and personality styles that, like I mentioned before we started, sometimes we're like a head of lettuce trying to hammer nails, and it's very difficult. And so, for me, I've recognized now fully, it's taken me years of really studying this and now knowing exactly what it is. But like for me, it's people. Like there's a lot of things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I can shoot video, I can edit video, and I can do, I would say, a better than average job. I can do a really good job. People will hire me to do these things without any help, and I don't even have to hire anybody. But if there's only so much time in a day to do something, and what do I love and what am I really best at? And for me, my reputation and my ability to build relationships and connect and talk, and I mean, people say Michael's making money when his mouth is moving. And so me doing that, I can take and get people who love to shoot and love to edit, and they might only be able to get $2,000 for a job where I can get $8,000. Same exact job, same exact client. But if I just said, here you go, such and such, you deal with it, I don't want anything to do with it, they might not have the confidence or belief or even the reputation or these things to charge what I can charge, because I know how to talk to them. I have the confidence and belief system. I have the reputation. I mean, these people that, people think, what people don't see, what's interesting is even like people that we deal with at the top, they get off stage and they look and they go, how was that?
Yeah, they have the same
even
fears.
People at the top of the top of the top of their game are still asking, what did you think I did? How'd I do? Did I do good? Did I do all right? And nobody's going to see that for the most part. They just see this really confident person on stage. So, I still have those things myself, 100%. But I just find that area is where I'm stronger. Like we did one of these debrief calls that we do with people just recently. And the guy's adapting to my personality style. But right out of the gate, he says, you give me a computer and some coding software, and I'm good all day. And for me, I'm going, man, I'd rather jump off a cliff than sit at that computer and code or even edit or any that's why I procrastinate. See, in the instant when I did a same day edit, I had those 2 hours that I had to focus to get that edit done. But then the payoff was 200 or 300 people at a wedding reception watching that video. And they were going to be like, oh my gosh, and they flipped out and they're hugging and laughing and crying. That's why I could get that done so quickly. You take that away, I'd procrastinate forever because I got no result out of it. Like I would barely get emails or phone calls or anything back after I would, ultimately deliver a video that didn't look a lot different than the video that I gave them, that day. But just the fact that we did it that day made all the difference. So
the work you're doing now with Jumpstarters, kind of helping kind of creative entrepreneurs just get over some of those same hurdles that you've gone over yourself. But maybe describe a time where you worked on a project, you worked on something, and like you were saying, you gave it your heart and your soul, you gave it all, but for whatever reason, it just didn't really work out like you'd hoped. And what were the kind of lessons that you took from that experience?
Well, it's interesting. There's things I think we might have talked about. I might have sent you something, and it's interesting why I always when I talk about some of the questions I get ahead of time. My brain in the moment is always on different things at times. So what I may have said 2 days ago or on an interview 2 weeks ago would potentially slightly tweak. But what's interesting is Jumpstarters. Actually, this is I love being very transparent. The thing I always did when I'm doing Jumpstarters is I like to share what's happening. How are we growing? How is this going? What's happening? What's going on? And because I feel like there's so much out there where it's all sugar coated, because it's ultimately easier to sell something where if you're going to make it sound like it's somewhat easy or you've found the answer and now everything will just be super easy and you won't have any problems or struggles. Just follow this step by step. But the reality is that's not true. And the only people who have these massive breakthroughs in 6 months is ultimately because they spent a year, 2 years, 6 years, 10 years before that all of a sudden they made a shift in a moment. And then in 6 months, incredible things happened for them. But they didn't start, they weren't a plumber one day and then build $1 million company 6 months later, selling plumbing training. It doesn't, because they don't understand online market. There's so many other elements. And so for me, when I started Jumpstarters, the interesting thing that a lot of people I've started to share, but people don't know, was my low self-worth and self-confidence in regards to my skills and abilities, because I always was pointing the spotlight at someone else. So in video, the video was the spotlight, because ultimately I'm thinking they need a video and I make a video. So they don't need Michael Gebben. They need a video, and I happen to make that video. Then when I started down different little projects and businesses online, one was actually with one of my mentors. And I was going to do this myself, and then I reached out to him to sell his stuff as an affiliate. I was learning about all this stuff. I'm like, well, he had good stuff, and rather than reinvent the wheel. So then he says he wants to partner up, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm sitting here thinking, my freaking mentor wants to partner with me. And then by the end, he was like, do your thing. We'll do my thing. We'll come together. Well, 3 days later, he's like, your energy's infectious, which is a thing I kept hearing, which I didn't believe until about 6 to 12 months ago. But he goes, let's partner up. So we do. And but I thought that business, that without him, he'd be okay. Like, us together was one thing, but I was like an enhancement to him. I thought that without me, he'd be fine, but without him, I'd be screwed. And I did multiple things until I started Jumpstarters, where that was what happened. It was about the other person. I'm like, I'm not really, I'm bringing some value here. I got some energy, but that's not really, that's not that important. Like, if they didn't, we're doing it together because we're friends, because we've become partners now. And I have some knowledge, but really they're the teacher, they're the trainer, they've got the knowledge. And so the spotlight was always pointed on other people. When I started Jumpstarters, I started it myself. And that was in September of 2015. And ultimately, 2014. By April of 2015, I held my first event. And that's where I had a guy who I'd met who was actually in the personality space. And he was one who just blew my mind. He was getting $10,000 for speaking engagements. And ultimately, he'd reached out saying he wanted to come to the event. And then he was like, I'm like, well, one, I was just like, you want to come? That's crazy. And then two, he said, well, if you want me to speak or whatever, I'm there for you, man. And I'm like, what the heck? This is crazy. Like, this guy I look up to and gets all this money he wants to come to my thing. And so we did it, and I loved it. But that day, I made the shift in my mind that started and got ever increasingly more extreme, to where I ended up positioning the entire company at one point in time where it was all about him. He was the one that provided the value. He's the one that provided the shifts.
And was that just that fear kind of kicking in of like an imposter syndrome and not wanting to be that person that was standing in front of you?
At times thought I didn't want the spotlight, and it wasn't imposter syndrome, and it was, for me, I was always pointing, like, my team did it. Even when these people would help me and I'd play a video at an event, I'd be like, do you want your name at the end? He's like, dude, I just work for your company. It's fine. You just put your logo. Like, you don't need to put my name at the end. So for me, it was always wanting to give credit to the people around me, but also just, I started my video production company thinking I'm not worth anything. Like, I remember saying, like, who's going to pay me like more than $500 or $1,000 to do something? Like, I'm just some kid. Funny thing is, now, besides my glasses and my scruff on my face, I don't look a lot older in the grand scheme of things, but my mindset, which is one of the biggest things that I believe, my work didn't go from getting $2,000 or $3,000 to getting $10,000 because my work changed drastically. It's because my mental game changed drastically.
And I think that same thing in the world of professional speaking as well, that's very common, where a lot of speakers that have moved from maybe the $7,500 up to the $15,000 or $20,000. They said, it's obviously my skills are, I'm continually improving my skills, but it wasn't a skills thing. It was a mindset thing that it just had to take time to work until I felt comfortable and feeling to be able to kind of say that. And it felt, strange the first couple of times doing it, but I knew that I could deliver, ultimately, behind that as well. So,
and that's the big, and then there was a guy named, I think his name is Brian Smith. He was the founder of UGG Boots. And I was with him once and we were talking about one of my big shifts back in 2008 was what's the difference between a $5,000 video, speech, whatever you want to, call it, and a $50,000 one. And for me, I thought it was the work. Like I thought it was what it looked like. I thought it was the effort put into it, the amount of people, the amount of money it even cost me. Like, oh, if I get a $50,000 project, it must have to cost me $40,000 or $30,000. Like there was all these things that ran through my mind. And for him, one of the biggest things is he's like, $45,000. Like that's the difference. That's one. And two, it's who you're dealing with as well. And then your ability to believe and have that confidence in that delivery of that result. And this kind of trifecta is huge, because, I've seen people whose work I think is dreadful, but because they've got the right relationships and connections and et cetera, they're getting $100,000 for work where I felt my work was better, like aesthetically, the final product was better than their work, but it was who they were dealing with and then their belief system around that. Because it's very difficult if, say, you're trying to sell a service to a solopreneur who makes $40,000 a year, the probability of selling a $150,000 project to them, you might have better chance of getting struck by lightning or winning the lottery. You might find one human on earth who you might be able to BS your way into getting them to, give their life savings and everything away to somehow buy into that. But at the end of the day, I don't want to deal with people where if I talk to 100, I might be lucky to get one that I almost scam into something. I'd rather be dealing with people who appreciate that value and can ultimately on a lot of levels afford that. But that I believe takes time as well. I've seen a lot of creatives that we've helped who for years they've been struggling because somebody told them they're worth more, which I believe, but with no reputation and no ultimate belief system and not even doing a lot of work to begin with, you can't, I want to do speaking, ultimately suck as a speaker up front and never having done any talks anywhere, just seeing speakers online, never doing talking, you're even nervous, you're scared, you've never done it publicly ever, it's all been private. You won't more than likely go from that to a $15,000 speaker with the first speech you do. Now, granted, unless you are so freaking well connected that you just fall into the right thing, but even then, are you going to get any other ones? Because if you bomb that thing, that might hurt the reputation of the referral and all sorts of things. So I just think that people need to, I remember seeing Tony Robbins say when he wanted to become one of the best speakers there was around, he saw the best speaking 3 to 5 to 8 times a month. And he thought, you know what, I'm going to speak 3 to 5 times a day. I don't care who I'm speaking to, and I don't care how many times or how many people there are, I'm going to do it. And that's my whole thing about MIA. Like everybody's, trying to be perfect, but everybody's got an opinion as well. So one person thinks something's perfect while another person thinks it's horrible. We can't let that cripple us. And so to get out there and do that, regardless of what you're getting paid, I have found that the quicker you're aware of that, the quicker you'll be able to get paid and get paid a premium. Because, and even certain personality types, like I'm a style of person, no matter how many times I'm told, I have to experience it for myself. Not 100 times, sometimes just once. But no matter how many times I'm told, if I haven't experienced it for myself at least one time, I still won't fully believe it. I'm like, I gotta see it for myself. And
I guess that's what I know. Many of the Jumpstarter side of things, it's kind of workshop based. It's multi-day type event, which also kind of pulls to that. People that are more experiential, both on the teacher side and also on the student side. That's
if you need the extreme structure, we're probably not right for you.
As we start to kind of finish up here, let's talk about some kind of tools. And obviously, in your role previously on the video, you would have used lots of tools, but the kind of work that you're doing now, what are those kind of online resources or tools or apps that you're finding really useful?
Yeah, for me, one of the things is like, honestly, I've started to just simplify. Like I've always found that I have a shirt that I wear. It says "Keep things simple," and I find that the more complex I make things, which I think a lot of us do, but I know specifically for me, it's like my natural thing to complicate things before I simplify. But it's the removal of things that has helped me, be more efficient rather than adding tons of more like apps and all these kinds of things to me. Now, that being said, a tool that some of the things that I use a lot, like I love like Evernote. I love the little reminders on my Mac, just a couple simple things that help me keep notes and just get things out of my brain. Like I even just have a notebook just to write things down. And what I found is sometimes it's the removal of actually even having to like keep track of these things. Keep track of these things, but rather just remove them from my mind and put them in the computer or put them on paper. And I've looked back at these things that I haven't looked at for 6 months or a year. I'm like, dang, that happened. But rather keeping it all inside, which I find is just in life in general, like my most depressive time in my life, 2010 and 11.
It's using up that mental RAM all the time. You're just kind of going back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't tell people things. Like people didn't know I was kind of unhappy and depressed and not things weren't well. But once I started getting it out and talking to people, it made all the difference in the world. But yeah, I don't have a lot of apps. I mean, really, it's turning off all the notifications on my computer, on my phone. Like I want to remove as many distractions as possible. Actually, I'll give you one that just popped in my mind. But unroll.me allows me to see all the kind of subscriptions I have to things in email. And again, remove, like you mentioned, no. One lady, we started business at the same time. 8 years, 10 years later, she sees me. She's almost out of business. I'm doing really well. How did that happen? Same town, same everything. A different industry ultimately, but a lot of things being equal for all intents and purposes. Tell her a story, and she said exactly what's on your wall in front of you, which is, it sounds like the biggest thing you did was say no. And it's true. Like the more I've removed, the more distractions I remove, the more I simplify, the more I analyze for that 80-20 kind of all the time in life and business, et cetera, the more I find I have more time, I enjoy life more. I'm not constantly in an overload mode all the time. So
we gave Derek Sivers a bit of a name check, but what book would you recommend our listeners check out?
Yeah, so since we already kind of said the Anything You Want by Derek Sivers, a couple other books would be, I'm looking at them right now, which is, I'm good friends with James Altucher, who actually recorded the intro to my Massive Imperfect Action audiobook. But Choose Yourself and Reinvent Yourself are two great books by him that I really enjoy. And
his podcast is great because you would probably say himself he's not the one of the most eloquent of hosts, but he's just fantastic. I really enjoy listening to his podcast because his brain is working at 1 million miles an hour often.
Well, I think it's you see, and I apologize, but he's doing what I've kind of adapted, because I kind of get where he's coming from there, where sometimes I have these thoughts and then he just cuts in because he wants to make sure he gets that out of his head. So there's kind of this, ebb and flow. I think I've only done one interview where I think the lady wasn't exactly having that too much. But other than that, I mean, usually it's a pretty good thing. But his vulnerability in that, just kind of like cutting people off and getting in there when most people with those kind of, especially the high influential people that he gets, people don't typically cut them off. And so, he does. Yeah.
What about, I'm going to say on the music side, what about a record or an album that you think our listeners should check out? What would that be?
Two things I love is Augustana and Ben Rector are two kind of groups, or Ben Rector's a solo guy that I just love their music. So
great. And we'll put all those links here. People go to JamesTaylor.me and just type in Michael Gebben. You're going to get all these links for it as well. So final question for you, Michael. Let's imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you've got all the tools of your trade and all the knowledge you've kind of already acquired is already there and you're in your brain, but you have no one knows you. You have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
Would my talent be there, you said?
Your talent's there, your skill set's there.
But the relationships and connections and all that are kind of gone. Yeah. So if the talent in the knowing is all there, I mean, on certain levels, I think actually, knowing all the business and things that I'm in, and that I've dealt with, I'd actually probably go back to the weddings specifically and very quickly Well, it's twofold. I mean, there's a couple industries I could do this in, but the bottom line is I would essentially, I mean, the weddings, what was so great about them when I did same day edits is like the word of mouth just went like fire quickly because I was putting 200 or 300 people in front of my work. But I could also do that for the events and the speakers and thought leaders that I work for. So either one of those within the video side of things, just that ability to go and reach out and provide this value with no expectation really of anything in return, and just take this skill set of video, but make sure I'm doing it in a way that I'm getting it in front of basically their audience. So at the weddings, it's in front of the guests, and at the events, it's the same thing. I mean, we've done even Tony Robbins at 6,000 people. I mean, we showed our video to that entire group of people on the Sunday before it ended. And so that kind of stuff was huge for me because it got all these eyeballs in the moment they're like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Because it wasn't the normal kind of video people had seen. But for me, the bottom line is reaching out to people that I look up to or would like to work with or whatever, and providing that skill set. So if it's speaking and all that stuff, just making sure that I'm getting out there. Like the imperfect action is getting out there publicly and doing the work, because there's no amount of privateness, especially in the business side of things, that really helps anyone for the most part. I mean, you can help yourself. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes in people's lives that people don't see that get us to where we are. But at the same time, if the skill set is already possessed and all that hard work you've put in to be skilled at that craft, get it out there to people, provide value, and just give unconditionally. And
if people want to reach out to you or find out more about Jumpstarters or the other projects you're involved in, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, the best place right now is Take MIA. So like Take Massive Imperfect Action, but it's just takemia.com. And they can actually even take, I'm doing for the listeners of the podcast, typically doing a call with one of my personality consultants to go over an assessment, which was the thing I was mentioning earlier. It's no funny business. They can do it. It's kind of the starter in the process, but it's a great eye opener, because rather than just get a PDF that you look through and like, oh, that's interesting, you get a call with a pro who's going to go over that and just help bring a lot of light bulb moments and ahas and awareness to kind of the strengths and weaknesses, but not to put someone in a box. It's not about that. It's just to shed this light and give direction to maybe why some things have been so difficult. And when you're unaware of it, it's difficult to fix something or shift or pivot. But when you have that awareness, it's a lot easier. So they can find everything they need on that page, including a link to my audiobook that they can download for free, actually, of the Massive Imperfect Action, but they can also take that assessment and get a call if they'd like. So,
well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing all about your creative life and sharing with our audience. I wish you all the best with what you're doing in the future, and hope to catch up again soon.
Thanks, James. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to JamesTaylor.me. That's JamesTaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.